The wind howled through the desolate plains, carrying whispers of forgotten names and lost battles. The moon hung low, casting a pale light over the small wooden cabin that stood alone against the wilderness. Inside, the faint glow of a dying fire painted trembling shadows across the walls. Sarah Whitmore sat beside it, her hands clasped around a tin mug of cooling tea. The loneliness of widowhood had settled over her like the chill of winter, heavy and unrelenting. Her husband, a frontiersman, had perished months ago during a raid, and since then the nights had become longer, the silence sharper. She had learned to live with the quiet, until that night, when fate sent a visitor she never expected. The door creaked open without warning, and the wind rushed in with a gust that snuffed half the flame. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked by dust, fatigue, and something deeper, pain. His long dark hair was tied loosely, his eyes fierce yet weary. Sarah froze, heart pounding. His presence filled the cabin like thunder in a storm. She recognized his attire instantly, the fringed leather, the beads, the silent grace. He was Apache. For a tense moment neither spoke. Only the wind outside and the faint crackle of the fire broke the silence. The man raised his hand slowly, showing he held no weapon. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice low, almost a growl against the quiet. Sarah's instinct told her to reach for the old rifle leaning by the wall, but something in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't the look of an enemy, it was the look of a soul lost in the same wilderness that haunted her. He collapsed near the door, too weak to stand any longer. Blood stained his sleeve. He was wounded. Without thinking, Sarah rushed to his side, her fear overtaken by compassion. "You're hurt," she whispered. "Sit still." She tore a strip from an old sheet and pressed it against his wound. The man winced but didn't resist. The night dragged on. She tended to his injuries, offering him water and bread, watching as the tension slowly melted from his face. When he finally spoke again, his words were hesitant, as if he had not spoken to anyone for years. "My name is Katan," he said. "I was hunted for something I didn't do." Sarah listened quietly, her mind torn between fear and empathy. She knew too well what it felt like to be blamed for what life had stolen from you. As the fire warmed the small room again, the air between them began to change, not with words but with understanding. Outside, the wind began to die and snow started to fall softly across the plains. Inside, the fire grew bright once more. Katan sat near it, eyes closed, as Sarah draped a blanket over his shoulders. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt alive, filled with unspoken gratitude and a fragile, unexpected peace. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something stir in her heart that wasn't grief. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was the faint spark of something human. Something that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone in the world. The stranger in her cabin wasn't just another shadow from the wilderness. He was a survivor, like her. As the night deepened and the fire whispered low, Sarah glanced at him one last time before resting her head against the chair. Outside, the snow covered their world in quiet white. Inside, two lost souls, once strangers, shared the warmth of a single fire against the endless cold. The morning light crept slowly into the cabin, stretching across the wooden floor like golden fingers. Sarah awoke to the crackle of the rekindled fire. For a brief, blissful second, she forgot the events of the night before. Then she saw him, Katan, sitting silently by the window, sharpening a small blade with calm precision. The wound on his arm had been cleaned and bandaged, and though his strength seemed to have returned, his eyes still carried a storm within them. He looked at her and gave a quiet nod. "You helped me," he said simply. "You didn't have to." Sarah poured him a cup of warm tea and handed it over. "You looked like you needed it," she replied softly. The two sat in silence, the kind that felt more like understanding than distance. Outside, the world was white and still, snow blanketing everything in sight. The wilderness had never seemed so silent or so peaceful. But peace was fragile, and they both knew it. Katan broke the quiet. "They'll come," he said. "The soldiers. They think I attacked their camp, but I didn't." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "My brother led them away." "He didn't make it." Sarah's heart sank. She had heard of the tensions, of how quickly blood could be spilled on these lands, of how truth often died before men did. She met his gaze and said, "Then let them come." "I won't turn you in." Katan stared at her, his expression unreadable. You'd risk your life for a man you just met? Sarah looked toward the fire, her voice trembling with memory. When my husband died, no one came to help. Not one soul, maybe. I just don't want to be like them. For a moment, the air in the cabin felt alive, charged with something that wasn't fear or grief, but hope. Katan rose and stepped closer, his eyes softer now. You're stronger than most, he said quietly. Stronger than you know. The day passed slowly. Snow fell heavier, trapping them inside. They spoke little, yet every glance, every shared silence told a story. Sarah found herself watching him, the way he moved, the way he carried his pain without bitterness. In him she saw something that reminded her of herself, someone trying to survive in a world that had taken too much. As dusk settled, Katan stood by the fire, the glow painting his face in gold. When the storm clears, I'll leave, he said. I can't bring danger to your door. Sarah shook her head, her voice low. Maybe danger's already here. Maybe it's been here since I lost everything. Sudden noise outside shattered the quiet. The crunch of boots on snow, distant but coming closer. Katan's hand went to his knife. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Through the small window, she saw the glint of rifles in the fading light. Soldiers. Katan turned to her. If they find me here? You're not going anywhere, she interrupted firmly. She moved to the door and bolted it, her hand steady despite the fear rising in her chest. They won't take you. The pounding on the door came soon after. Open up, a voice barked. We're looking for an Apache fugitive. Sarah's heart raced. Katan looked at her, ready to face whatever came. But before he could speak, she whispered, Trust me. Hid him behind a wooden panel, near the fireplace, a narrow space barely large enough for a man to crouch. Then she opened the door. The soldiers entered, scanning the cabin. You seen anyone pass this way, ma'am? Sarah met their eyes without flinching. No one but the wind and the snow, she replied evenly. They searched briefly but found nothing. One of them glanced at the fire, then back at her. If you're lying, it'll go bad for you. I've already lost everything I could lose, she said quietly. When the door finally closed and the soldiers disappeared into the storm, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Katan emerged from the hiding place, his eyes full of something words couldn't hold. Gratitude, disbelief, and respect. You saved my life, he said. Sarah smiled faintly. Maybe you saved mine first. Outside, the snow had stopped. The silence returned, not cold or lonely this time, but peaceful, almost sacred. The fire flickered between them, casting soft light on two souls who had found warmth in the unlikeliest of places. Katan looked toward the door. When I leave tomorrow, the world will call me an outlaw, he said. But tonight, I feel human again. Sarah nodded. Then that's enough. The flames whispered softly as they sat together. Two strangers bound not by fate, but by the courage to see humanity where others saw enemies.